right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our July meeting of the Metro Arts Commission. I'll call us to order at 12:11. Again, welcome and welcome to all of our visitors in our audience. We do have a full agenda today, and so I would just ask that people be reminded and be mindful of their time. Be mindful of during public comment, sticking to your 2 minutes because we do have a lot to handle today, and we want to make sure that we are respective of everyone's time. I do want to welcome one of our new commissioners, Mr. Evan Brown. Do you want to introduce yourself or say anything on the record for us?
Sorry.
Yeah, push the screen, yeah.
What time is it? Good evening, afternoon, everybody. Evan Brown, independent curator, gallerist here in Nashville. Work with several artists and some community partners here in Nashville. So I'm excited to be on the board, and thank you to you all for having me.
Thank you so much. I do want to do a land acknowledgement. I've been working through this, and I said this in the executive board meeting, but I do want to kind of tweak our land acknowledgement a little bit. But until we figure what that looks like, I'll do this land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of indigenous people who have lived and cared for this land for generations. We pay our respects to their elders, present, past, and emerging, and recognize their enduring connection to this land, water, and community. So now it's public comment period, and before I turn it over to Vivian to do our time and let us know who's all on in the queue for public comment, just understand that we do have 2 minutes, and we are trying to stick to those 2 minutes, and you had to sign up prior to coming in here. We will have a total of 20 minutes for all public comment. Hold on.
Chair.
All right. So, Vivian, how are we ready for public comment?
Yes.
Okay. If you are, who's first on the list?
First, we have Ms. Lydia Youssef.
Okay. And remember to hit the green button so that people online can hear you. Okay, perfect. It's already on?
All right, I'll let you know when your time starts, and I'll also let you know when you have 1 minute.
Thank you.
Your time starts now.
As one of the Title VI complainants, I just want to vocalize that this is not conciliation. The issue that happened last year was about discrimination and the potential lawsuit that happened because of that discrimination against working class artists, against the will of the council, the people, and several BIPOC and allied commissioners and the director. It was not about the application nor the artists and their projects. My thoughts on this agreement were recorded at the MHRC meeting last week alongside 3 of the complainants, so I'm not going to take up too much time on that. But I will say one of the failures of this agreement is to protect Thrive and our tax dollars. Truly progressive cities like Charleston, Durham, Atlanta, Miami, Houston, Portland, Chicago, and more fund their artists directly. They even fund festivals and cultural events. Why? Because direct funding to artists benefits the economy and the community. I spoke to a Thrive recipient who, with her $10,000, paid out 28 local artists for multiple free events in North and East Nashville. When there's an investment locally, that money stays local and builds Nashville. Local artists collaborate and reinforce an ecosystem and culture of belonging and inclusion that multi-million-dollar institutions simply cannot. I was recently in a room of 100 people speaking about this Title VI complaint and asked the room, how many of you either work as an artist in this city or are aspiring to work as an artist in this city? Dozens of hands went into the air. I asked how many had applied for Metro Arts funding. All the hands went down. What we're asking from this commission is not rocket science. It's troubling to me how often finance and legal are cited at meetings and no mention of community. I ask you, is this commission beholden to bureaucrats? Do bureaucrats dictate the limits of what we can see in Nashville? Is Nashville an oligarchy? I ask that y'all center Nashvillians. We've waited for decades. Do not disappoint. Do not let legal and finance steer you into another lawsuit.
Time. All right, thank you, Lydia. The next person we have is Reverend Davy Tucker.
Good morning, Commissioners. Stand before you this morning asking that as you debate the acceptance of the conciliation agreement, that you would ultimately accept it and approve it. It is not perfect, even as the previous speaker outlined that they're not totally happy with it. And as a conciliation process, I think that is ultimately the end goal on the front end, that nobody gets everything that they want. But I do think it does create a common starting point for all of us to chart a new way forward in a way that will center equity in the use of public funds and our collective resources. There are still many unresolved issues and unanswered questions that have implications even beyond this issue with your commission. But it does, again, as I said, it creates a great starting point
1 minute.
as you move forward in the consideration of how grants will be done in the future. The council, MHRC, and other entities are watching this, hoping that you use all the innovation, all of the information, and not take the shortcut route to resolving how we go forward. Because this is a critical issue, and we are concerned with the last 3 or 4 issues that will be the crossing of the I's and the dotting of the T's of this issue that is really critical, that has yet to be worked out yet. So MHRC, particularly with Ashley, is available to help and will continue to be involved, because we have an interest of representing Nashville's interest in how our collective resources will be used going forward. Easy is not
Time.
always the best way to go. So we still stand ready to talk, to meet with you. We want to thank your interim director, who's given time to us back and forth to make sure that Nashville gets this thing right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, and our last public comment is going to come from Councilwoman Joy Stiles. Right, and your time starts now.
Thank you very much, Commissioners, for your time. I wanted to come before you today to talk about a couple of things, one of which is the bill that was before us at Council, BL 2024-343, that dealt with putting a council member on your commission, as well as the approval of the process for grants coming through us as well. So on Tuesday night, we had several amendments. One amendment I was adamantly against, which actually removes the council member. So it was a very, very close vote. And I think part of the example from the person that ran the amendment was we received an email that appeared to come from the executive committee. And certainly as council members, when we receive communications from commissioners, which happens often, if an executive member sends something, that weighs more heavily. What I understand is that this was an individual commissioner opinion. So I would ask
1 minute.
the chair if you're able to provide clarity for the body, because that certainly goes into our voting process, that was not from the executive committee, but rather from that individual commissioner. When the amendment went through, I did withdraw the bill. I will be bringing the bill back because the amendments that passed previously were acceptable to the body. We have several commissions that have council members on them right now. The Metro Action Commission has council members. I served on that board for 2 years. This is in no way trying to single this body out. However, given all the issues that have taken place, it is reasonable to want to have someone here that would not have a vote. That was also part of the legislation. To be here, that if you have questions, we might be able to answer those questions in a quicker fashion. Some of the meetings that I have watched or attended, I have noticed there have been questions between legal and I think council would be helpful. By the way, we did get you an additional $250,000 on top of the budget, and I still plan on trying to get you guys to $10 million by 2027. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That concludes our public comment.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you for the people who signed up to speak. As I always say, oftentimes we don't know your concerns, your issues unless you bring them before us. And so we always appreciate hearing from the community about your thoughts and your concerns. So thank you so much. So now we will go into the approval of our minutes. You received 2 sets of minutes in your packet, the May 16th and the May 24th. We'll take them separately. Are there any changes or corrections for the May 16th minutes?
I'd move to approve.
Martin, second.
I wasn't at this meeting, but as I was reading them, if you go to the second page, it says during discussion, Commissioner Wade raised concerns. And then it said he inquired about who manages. I didn't know who it was that was the he. Because there's really no, I thought Commissioner Wade is female. On the second page right here. He. It's just a matter of correcting, either identifying who it was or if it
Updating
was.
to she.
You think it was Commissioner Wade?
Those are all her comments. It's just an additional
Then it just
S.
needs a typo. Okay, thank you.
All right, if there are no changes outside of that, I know we do have a motion on the floor to approve it. Do you want to amend that to say approve it with the necessary changes and corrections?
I move to approve with the necessary changes and corrections.
Second from someone who was at that meeting.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's
All right, all those in favor, aye. Opposed, no? All right, motion carries. All right, so let's look at our May 24th minutes. Any changes or corrections? Not, we can get a motion to approve with any necessary changes or corrections, particularly clerical, any clerical additions?
Unless I missed an H, I move to approve.
And I will second that motion.
Someone who was at that meeting. You were not at that meeting, so yes.
I second.
I was.
Okay.
Oh, shoot.
Well, you were at, okay, well, it says you were absent here, so that needs to be updated then if you were here at May 24th.
Right, so I'm listed as absent and present, so we need to fix that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Did you hear that? Okay, perfect, okay. So all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries, so thank you so much. The minutes for May 16th and May 24th have been approved. Next, we'll get to our action and discussion items. The first thing on the agenda is from internal audit. You received the internal audit report in your package. We will now have Ms. Lauren Riley and Mr. William Walker come. Make sure that the green light is on so the people online can hear you, and we will turn it over to you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for having us today. I'm Lauren Riley.
Is it on?
I'm Lauren Riley. I'm the Metropolitan Auditor. I'm here with Bill Walker, our Audit Manager, and we're with the Office of Internal Audit. Our office is an independent agency within the Metro government, established to do performance audits and investigations and other procedures of the metropolitan government. What we do in order to be is we report up to a 6-person audit committee. That 6-person audit committee is set out in the Metro Charter.
Oh, there you go. Now you can hear me better, right? Okay. Sorry about that. The green light looked like it was on. And now it's not. Okay. Insertion.
Yeah, I don't think so.
What closer? Okay. There you go. Something's making it. Still echoing. Yeah, we can do that. Let me turn that off. Oh, you're fine. Okay. So our audit committee is a 6-person audit committee that keeps us independent. And the way that they do that is they set up that we report to no one governing body. So our audit committee is made up of 2 council members. That's currently Councilmember Berkeley Allen and Councilmember Courtney Johnston, the Vice Mayor, Angie Henderson, the Finance Director, Kevin Crumbo, and a direct appointee from the Tennessee Society of CPAs, Tom Bates, and a direct appointee from the Nashville Area Chamber of Commerce, Matthew Scanlon. That 6-person audit committee has to approve any audit that we do. So in December, we took to them some concerns, internal and external, that we had heard, requesting an audit of Metro Arts, the financial processes. And at the December 2023 audit committee meeting, we were approved to do this audit. To kind of high level give you an information about our audits before we kind of go into the audit. Our audits follow very strict standards. They're government auditing standards, or they're also called Yellow Book. They are very strict in the fact that we have to have supporting documentation, quality control in place. We do planning where we ask information and we follow processes. And then we go into field work where we're actually testing the objectives that we've set into the reporting phase. And so that reporting phase is where we come out with the final report. That final report is the only public piece that comes out. And that's actually where I'm going to turn it over to Bill to kind of walk you all through the actual report.
Well, good afternoon. It's very nice to be with you today. Again, my name is Bill Walker. I'm the audit manager for the Office of Internal Audit. Before we give you kind of the Reader's Digest version of the report, we do want to thank the Metro Arts staff, both current and previous, Vivian, Chris, Sydney. We also want to recognize our staff. We had 3 staff members on this. We had a lead auditor. She had 2 staff members. This was a challenging audit in a lot of ways. Had a lot of conflicting testimony to supporting documentation to really piece together what was going on the ground. It was difficult to obtain. But everybody, we had a lot of people working very hard trying to help us out. And we want to thank people for that. When you look at this audit, when we were tasked to do this audit, we basically went into it to ask 2 questions. And this is kind of what we would call a nuts and bolts audit. Do you have an internal control framework, or do you have an infrastructure in place to make sure that certain objectives are being met? In this particular instance, it was, we looked at the Thrive Awards, operating grants, and we looked at financial transactions. So when it comes to your Thrive Awards and your operating grants, do you have controls in place, or do you have processes in place to make sure that, if I'm an artist or I'm an organization and I submit an application, is that application actually being recorded? It's not getting lost somewhere. Do you have controls in place to make sure that it's being worked the way that you intend to it? That it's not being, sitting at somebody's desk or in some limbo queue or whatever. Do you have controls in place to make sure that your scoring is fair, that it represents the scoring matrix and the will of the commission? Do you have controls in place to make sure that payments are done timely? Do you have controls in place to make sure that they're correct amounts? And just as importantly, do you have controls in place to monitor? If we're giving money out to organizations or to Thrive Artists, how do you know that that money is being spent in accordance with what's intended? Okay. And then in terms of financial controls, do you have controls in place to make sure that your expenditures, your financial transactions conform to Metro rules, policies, and procedures? In terms of the grants and the Thrive Awards, as much as we lament this, as much work that went into this, we had a scope limitation. As Lauren said, we have standards that we have to go by. We have to have a sufficient level of evidence to be able to draw conclusions. In this particular instance, you would talk to people and some of the parts of the process sounded good, but again, the supporting documentation was just not there for us to give a solid opinion. So there's a scope limitation there. One of the main issues is that your documentation, it really is in material disarray. You really want to do a better job or strive to have a better document retention program that you can back up the things that you're doing. And then in terms of your financial controls, The answer to that was no. There was intentional and pervasive circumvention of rules, bypassing of our human resources department, our payroll department, ignoring civil service rules and policies, which we'll go into in a minute. When you go through the report, I know it's a long report. There's like 12 observations, 35 some odd recommendations. Now, some of those recommendations are redundant because they address the same issues. But when you go through, we'll divide them into two different buckets, the ones that relate to the grants and the Thrive Awards, and then the ones that relate to the financial transactions. When it comes to your grants and Thrive Award, one thing that kind of really affected things has to do with succession planning and training. One of our observations has to do with staff, one has to do with the commission. Okay, so with your staff, there were steps taken to try to make sure that the passing of the torch was successful. So for example, you had overlapping of positions where before somebody would leave, they'd bring somebody in to kind of help train, onboard that person. For whatever reasons, those training efforts were not successful. Another issue is you don't have really detailed policies and procedures. That's really important that if you're new or even if you're not new, just being able to have something to fall back on to be able to know how to do certain steps or how certain processes work. And then the third issue has to do with the relationship with the central departments. You've got like human resources, legal, finance. They exist in part to assist the other departments. They hire professional people. They know the best practices within their related fields. They have deep institutional knowledge. When you talk to staff or you talk to different folks, they felt like their access to these departments was limited. There's also a strain between the relationship between Metro Arts and these departments. You really need to have a good working relationship and be able to talk to these folks. I do our budget. I understand our budget methodology. I don't understand the software system. So every year I have to call our budget analysts, and I've had 3 of them. They're very good to sit there and walk you through how to do things. So that's very important that you keep that relationship going. In terms of the commission, you've had a lot of turnover, just like the staff. And like the staff, when you see the minutes or watch the meetings, the commission is in good faith attempting to carry out their responsibilities, but there seems to be, like the staff, lack of clarity on what their specific roles and responsibilities are. Now, part of that is the commission's been put in a position they're not built for. So you've got governance and you've got management. Those are 2 very distinct functions. And it's not uncommon to see those lines get blurred, but whenever they do get blurred, it gets messy. So, for example, the commission, you have a very broad mission at Arts. There's a lot of different ways you could carry this out. Part of your job is what direction do we want to go in? And then you have a staff, management, their job, they are the arms and the feet of the commission. They carry out the will of the commission. So they're doing the applications, they're scoring them, they're processing the payments, that sort of thing. Well, you got in a situation where there are issues, there's a lot of people in good faith are trying to resolve those issues. Normally you would fall on management, but like we just said, you're having issues there. They're not built. They're in good faith trying to carry out their missions, but they're not built to help either. So you're kind of in this nether world. So you want to have good definitions on who's responsible for what. You also have bylaws. Real important that we know what's in those bylaws, and I know y'all are working on this, but you want to periodically review them. They're fluid. You can change them. You want to communicate with your director and staff. What's the information that's helpful for you in this meeting? So, for example, you probably want something like an aging report. So here's all our grants. We're going to give out 100. We've given out 75. We got 25 remaining. This is when we expect to have them out. These are anticipated problems. This is what we're going to do to try to resolve those problems or whatnot. And then the final, and this is something bigger than arts, okay? There's a lot of conversation going through Metro in terms of how do we prepare boards and commissions? How do you prepare like people that you're onboarding to be successful? And it's tricky. There's people looking at it, but at a minimum, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sit down with your legal rep and your director, management, and just talk about, legal is going to help you with open meetings laws, ethics, that sort of thing, and laws related specifically to this commission. And then your management's going to help you with, this is our mission and this is what we do to carry it out. And that's where you work together in terms of, this is the information that would be helpful to make sure that we're carrying out our duties. Other things with the grants and the Thrive Awards, again, it goes back to no policies and procedures. Really, and again, people were doing the best they could to get us documentation. We went through emails, we were going through share drives, talking to all sorts of people. Again, you talk to them about the process. They put a lot of effort into the scoring matrix and trying to make sure that the scoring's done fairly. They'll have a team, and then there's a person at arts who's kind of refereeing to make sure people don't go off ranch. That's great. We just can't support, there's not documentation to support it, so we can't make a conclusion. Some of the things we did find, there's not a real robust monitoring program. What you do is you have, whether you're an operating grant or you're a Thrive artist, you send in reports, closeout reports. And the closeout reports tell you kind of like what that artist or what that organization did with the funds that they received. Some of them were better than others, some of them we couldn't find. But it's all self-reported. What you really want to do is have some methodology in place where somebody is going out to verify that what they say they're doing in these reports, that they're actually doing, that they're carrying out they're spending the public funds the way that they were intended. Another thing, and this is an example of kind of how we had to pivot a lot. What we really wanted when we started the audit is we wanted a list of all the applications for Thrive Artists and operating grants for fiscal year 23 and 24. Well, we couldn't get them. So then what we did was say, okay, we'll start with payments, because you've got a payment, you should have had an application. That's not ideal because, that's not going to catch an application that doesn't get work. Somebody submits an application that just gets lost somewhere. But that's what we had, so that's what we went with. Well, then halfway through the audit, a previous employee was kind enough to send us a listing of the 24 Thrive applications. So we took that. And one of the things we know is you have declined applications, which you would expect. That's management's prerogative. You're going to have to reject some of these applications. But the issue was, again, going back to supporting documentation, there really wasn't sufficient documentation to say why that particular application was declined. And you want to be able for defense and just to make sure you're being fair, that you're not somehow or another showing favoritism in your scoring process or whatnot. You need to be able to defend those applications that you decline. Those were the big issues with the grants and the Thrive Awards. Oh, the last thing, and there's been a lot of talk on this one, is how do you classify your Thrive Awards? There's a code that says you cannot, or what it says is you explicitly have to give grant funds to organizations. That's an issue, and then there's also the issue with they treat them as a procurement. Now, I know as an accountant, we're CPAs. That doesn't mean a lot to some people, but being classified as a procurement, there's a reason for that. Your pure procurement's going to be, okay, we give somebody money, they do a painting, and then we own the painting and we hang it in a foyer somewhere. So when people, your users of the financial statements are looking at that, that's the kind of thing they're looking at. Nobody is saying do away with Thrive or recipients, but you do. It's a form over substance thing. You want to make sure that how you treat it matches the substance of the transaction or the activity. It's really more of a grant than it is a procurement. In terms of financial transactions, we'll start with temporary employees. The way it works with temporary employees, let's say I've got an employee. They're a great employee. I need them there on a day-to-day basis, but they get sick. So they're out for 3 months. And I don't have anybody internally that can take that position. Well, Metro has a protocol. We have 3 contracts that you can use where the temporary agency, they go out, they do the recruiting, they do the interviewing, they do the hiring, they set the rates. You just tell them what you need, they send it to you, and then you pay them an agreed upon rate. In this particular case, that process was bypassed. They used a contract that is explicitly says it's not for temporary employees. It's basically a payroll processing for seasonal employees, think like lifeguards at the Wave Country. Arts did the recruiting, they did the interviewing, they did the hiring, they set the rates, they gave leave time, they gave raises. you could argue that in form they were called temporary employees, but in substance they were Metro employees. And there's a lot of risk with this. We asked them, why did you set it up this way? They said, well, human resources, we needed them quickly. Human resources is too slow. Okay, but you didn't go through the normal protocol. And you have human resources. We have civil service rules and policies for a reason. Human resources in the hiring process, they monitor things to make sure we're in compliance with those things. So we want to make sure that, one, the people that we hire are qualified. We want to make sure that there's no discrimination in the hiring process. We want to make sure that, we're paying people. We don't want to underpay people or overpay people. We want to make sure that we give benefits, but not excessive benefits, because we want to be good employers, but we also want to be good stewards of public funds. It's also transparency and accountability that's its issue. Now, to be clear, and I want to be very clear on this, we did not see anything with these temporary employees that they were mistreated or whatnot. But from a control environment, from a rules environment, from a cultural tone environment, if all of Metro were to do what Metro Arts did, you're just opening yourself up to what could potentially be just a lot of issues. I mean, if you have a director that does go rogue and treats employees poorly, your remedy, you can't just go. Civil service gives you certain protections as an employee that you do not have in this temporary employee situation. So that's something that needs to be shut down. The other thing with Goodson, that's the vendor that they used. They gave us all like their pay stubs for the people that they paid. So we tabulated all that information. We had about 10 employees that were paid under this contract, $600,000, a little bit over, $106,000 in overtime. And when we asked, and it could be that you needed the overtime, but there's no, again, getting back to that supporting documentation, there's nothing to justify it. We ask about, give us scopes of work, give us what were they doing, is there kind of any output that we can look at? We did not see that. We couldn't get satisfactory answers. You had a couple of what we call atypical transactions. That's where, in your payroll, the payroll system is a 2-week period. So normally it'd be 80 hours. That's what you're going to be getting paid for. One person got paid 270 some odd hours within one time period. You had several employees, I think 3 or 4, their overtime was like 60 to 65 hours of overtime. And again, just no supporting documentation on why that amount was paid. And then finally, civil service rules, I didn't mention this before, they put time limits on how long you can be a temporary employee, which is 6 months. 3 of the 10 exceeded that as when we cut the audit off. The next thing with financial transactions has to do with split purchases. What that is, if I need to purchase something, okay, the amount of scrutiny that I'm going to have to go through depends on how much money I'm going to spend. And the magic number is $25,000. There's a big difference in what I have to go through for a $24,000 purchase versus a $26,000 purchase. And they're not the first department to do this, but what people will do is they'll try to split the purchases up. So if you got a $100,000 purchase, you'll try to get it invoiced like in 5 different invoices. You can't do that. And in this particular case, we had consultants tell us they were asked to make sure you sent scopes of work under that 25,000. The average was like 24,100. And then when we got the scopes of work, they were just so vague. It was splitting purchases. So make sure you're in compliance with your procurement code. The last one on or I've got 2 more on the financial. Leave time. Okay, Metro, the civil service rules and policies, they outline how much leave time you get, vacation, sick. A lot of it's based on how long you've been here. And we have an R12 system. That's our accounting system of record. Everything in there needs to be really complete. It needs to be accurate. Again, goes back to transparency. It goes back to reporting. But the one weakness with R12 is that it doesn't have a system in place where you can record leave time. So what you have to do, you have to have a shadow system where you go in and you make requests for, I'm going to take sick time or vacation time. And then you have to do a journal entry that goes from whatever system you're using for, in this particular instance, it's called Honeybee. you have to do a journal entry from Honeybee over into R12. So when we looked at the Honeybee system and we compared it to R12, there was a lot of leave time that was being taken that was never put into the R12 system. And then another issue, and this was a bigger issue, they had created a leave type that doesn't exist. So, again, civil service rules and policies, they tell you what you can take. They created one called executive director leave pay and gave about 900 hours during the scope period. And it was basically to give people more time around the holidays. Now, again, we want to be good employers. We want to give good benefits, but there are limits. And the civil service rules and policies, a lot of people put time and effort into those things, management, employees, unions. So you can't just bypass those rules. Now, that is it in a nutshell in terms of our observations. I know I've taken a lot of your time, and thank you for listening. But basically, if you had to kind of sum things up, training, get your policies and procedures in order, make sure people know what they're doing, make sure people are trained, they stay in their lane. Documentation, make sure you've got good supporting documentation, follow the rules. It's not that you're trying to follow rules, but those rules are trying to promote principles or values, whether that be transparency or accountability or being good employers. They're there for a reason. We need to make sure we're doing the best we can to follow them. And then lean on those departments that are there to assist you. They're not perfect, but they're there to assist you, and they have a lot of knowledge. So that is it in a nutshell. Again, thank you for your attention and reading. I know it's kind of going fast. But we are happy to entertain any questions or dialogue you wish to get into.
Thank you, Mr. Walker and Ms. Riley. I almost called you by how I knew you before. But I appreciate the audit. I always look at audits as ways that we can improve. And I don't think, and I'm speaking for myself, I'm not sure if there's anything in the audit that was a surprise. Some of the things, particularly the things that were mentioned about the commission, I think commissioners, we knew those things. And we have been talking about how to deal with those things as a commission. One thing I did notice, and I just want to make, in just in case there was some questions from other commissioners, there were no responses from the department because our interim director just got here and not truly knowing how to respond. So typically there will be there would have been responses in the audit from the department. And so, and this may not even be a question for you all, but just from the commission, we would, at least I would like to see some responses or just some ways that we can improve this. So maybe by our October meeting, we can just get just feedback from the department on the audit, just to see where they are, how you are improving, what steps you're going to take to improve. And so this may not even be a question for you. This is just Leah talking out loud of just things that we could see so that we can see some improvement and to how we can do better or be better. And so I'll turn it over to the other commissioners, Commissioner McCoy and then Commissioner Watts.
I want to thank you for the audit and the results and your explanation. There is an appendix at the back of this that's called Assessed Risk Ranking, has colors on it, blue and red, and it says agree, disagree, and proposed completion date. Are we supposed to fill that out?
So that is actually what Commissioner Love was speaking about. That is our matrix where normally management fills that out before we issue the audit. They accept or reject our recommendations because we cannot force anybody to implement anything. And then they put in their kind of action plan and an estimated date, because we use that to then follow up to make sure that those recommendations were either implemented, or we come back out and do an audit, or if they're not implemented, we report back to our audit committee to let them know. So management is typically who responds to that. But since Dr. Coleman had not been here very long when this audit was completed, she came in when the draft report was already being written. We are allowed to issue it without the responses, but with the expectation, as we've talked about with Dr. Coleman, that she would work to put some in there and kind of give us some estimated dates soon enough.
I anticipate that she'll do that, but I also want to know when she gives you a response, will we see you all again?
I mean, that is up to you all. Normally, it would be in there already. Y'all would see us again when we do a follow-up audit to see if everything was actually implemented.
And those are the steps that I'm
Yes.
asking about. One is management gives you a response. Then there is a proposed date for completion, whenever that is. Who checks on whether the completion is accurate and has been achieved? And then at what step would internal audit do another audit?
So we would actually be the ones who ultimately check. What happens is if say you put in a June 30th, 2025 implementation date, on middle of July, I'm going to be emailing Dr. Coleman and saying, did you implement that audit recommendation? And we accumulate that. We don't come out recommendation by recommendation. We wait until the majority of them have been implemented. And then we come out and do a full follow-up audit. And so we would then report back out. We would issue another report. We do follow-up reports, and that would be issued to you all so you would all see it. But we're the ones following up with Dr. Coleman.
That follow-up report, is it similar to this audit report that you gave us?
So the follow-up audit, which technically for a normal audit, we would do a very narrow, we come out, check your recommendations. In this instance, because of the number of observations that we had, we would like to do another full audit. There were smaller risks that we may have seen while we were doing work but didn't have time to actually verify that we probably would include in that as well. So it would be a full audit report like the one you have instead of our much shorter follow-up audits.
Thank you.
Commissioner Watts.
You sound like my meeting of earlier this week. We did talk about what we were doing and how we were going to do some things, and Dr. Coleman even talked about plans that she is working on. Budget and oversight, we see as those, and by the way, the answer is us. Who's looking at us, looking over this, is putting into place, if not specific actions, I understand a plan of action over a time period in which you'll come back and review. So those are the kind of things we're doing. I think the other piece is, and I'll just say this, if there's another date for us, has nothing to do with you, but it has to do with the state agency, and that's October 1. So there's some things that we might need to do between now and then, and they're using the audit, this audit and our response to this audit as criteria for whether or not we may be eligible to apply for grants from Tennessee Arts Commission. So there's another date that's out here floating too. So you didn't set the date, Tennessee Arts did, but I just needed to let the board members know that. And there's much more, but I'll talk a little bit more about that. But my question really is one that deals with, you said intentional and circumventing of issues. Can you give us a couple of those? Because I'm trying to find those. And I've heard this, I've heard you once, so I've got notes from before, and I don't remember hearing that. So
That's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. It goes back to a couple of examples of that would be like the split purchases that we talked about, where you got the consultants are telling us, our vendors are telling us, they purposely asked us to send in the money underneath the $25,000, which tells you that they're intentionally trying to split the purchases. Another example of that would be like, again, to underscore this, where you used those temporary employees and you did not want to go through our human resources department and you did not want to go through the protocols to use temporary employees so that you could basically hire people under your own, without being under the supervision of our human resources department or being, subject to the civil service rules or policies. And that was explicitly stated to us. So.
Okay. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Lefkowitz.
I thank you too. And I actually watched the meeting of your committee in which you talked about it. And it was, that was so helpful too. And kind of knowing more of the details. I had two questions. I know in that meeting, Vice Mayor Henderson, at one point we're talking about there was confusion, which I felt too, about well, how could this not have been flagged, right? Especially some of the HR things. And just kind of this interplay, right, between the internal system and then there's the Metro system. And so I guess my question is, it's possible, though, you think, to develop a system, right, in which I guess my question would be, why is that? I wonder if you could articulate that, like why things were able to go kind of through and were not flagged. Just, I know you answered that in the committee, but I think that would be helpful. And then my second question is about the documentation of the grants. And I was thinking about the conciliation agreement, which we're going to talk about. And I wonder if some of that documentation or rejection of those grants was addressed or is part of conciliation. I don't know if you know that.
We don't know the answer to the second question. I'm sure that they'd be happy to answer that for you. In terms of your first question, that is a great question, and it's actually a common question because Metro is huge. Arts Commission's a small piece of a really big organization, and you've got it. It's very fragmented in the sense of you've got boards and commissions. There's a ton of boards and commissions. You've got the mayoral departments. There's a ton of them. You've got elected officials. They're a totally different duck. And so what you have is all of these places, they have different governing protocols, different laws that they're following. They have, different risk. And so you've got central departments and that finance, for example, is a great example. They are responsible for the finances within Metro. That's their job. But they have to delegate it because it's so large. And so it comes into, you have to depend on the department in a lot of ways to catch. There's some things they're not going to catch. Now, they try to, like your purchase orders and things like that, but there's no way they're going to be able to catch every single one. And they may, from time to time, honestly make a mistake or miss something. That's everybody. That's the departments and central. But it really boils down to when they see that, you talk about red flags, there were a lot of red flags in terms of you had concerns from current employees, previous employees, current commissioners, previous commissioners, the central departments were seeing things they were concerned with. So, and you get into this documentation piece, it was hard. A lot of people went in there and tried to figure out what was going on. It was just very difficult. When you talk to the different people who've tried to go in there, it's been very difficult to kind of piece together what's going on. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Very helpful.
Are there any other comments or questions? All right. Oh, yes.
If I can make one more comment, just about the matrix. Once Dr. Coleman or y'all have provided us with those responses, we will reissue this report so that it is transparent to the public as well, so that will be out there. So you all will see that come back once we have those as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda is the MHRC agreement, conciliated agreement. Ms. Yarbrough, you have the floor.
Thank you. Didn't know if Dr. Coleman had any preliminary comments before I started, or if you just want me to take it from here.
Why don't you go ahead and take it from there?
Okay. So I'm Tyler Yarbrough. I'm here to report to you about the conciliation process that's been underway in regard to the Title VI complaint pending with the MHRC and a proposed resolution to that complaint. I want to give just a little bit of background, just as a reminder of how we got here, but it's important to do so that you all can remember exactly what's at stake in your decision about whether or not to resolve this matter. So back in October of 2023, a number of artists filed a complaint with the Metro Human Relations Commission alleging that this commission's decision to rescind its July 20th, 2023 vote on arts grant funding and then the subsequent revote in August at the August 17th, 2023 meeting, that those actions resulted in discrimination that violated Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And then the MHRC is charged with, has jurisdiction to investigate those types of complaints and did so. They investigated the complaint, talked to some of you, in fact, in the course of its investigation, issued a report on March 4th of 2024, and then also on that same day at its meeting, the commission, the MHRC, made a finding of probable cause that Metro Arts had in fact discriminated in violation of Title VI. There was also a finding at that meeting that there was probable cause to believe that Metro Legal's participation in the decision-making by Metro Arts also violated Title VI. There was also a vote at that meeting of the MHRC to move forward with a public hearing in regard to those issues and that finding of probable cause. I was hired shortly after the report was issued and that finding of probable cause was made to represent you in connection with the commission. And I understood very early on, my charge from you very much was to explore conciliation and explore a conciliated agreement to this matter. And so I'm very pleased to report to you today that we do have an outline of a proposed agreement that will be before you for your consideration and vote today. There has been very concerted effort, particularly over the last 2 months, among the parties and with counsel for MHRC and Metro Legal to get to this point to have a potential resolution to present to you. The first substantial step toward getting to this proposed agreement, of course, took place when Director Crumbo issued his memorandum on March 22nd of this year, announcing his decision to allocate $3 million for certain purposes, in particular to include in those funds to satisfy unfunded commitments to artists that were made under the July 2023 vote. And so as of today, as I understand it, all but 2 of those payments from that first round of supplemental payments to Thrive artists have been processed. I'm going to say that you all owe a lot of gratitude to Tessa Ortiz-Marsh, who coordinated a lot of that effort. After that, conciliation efforts really began in earnest when all of the parties met on May 22nd for a 2-hour-long conciliation meeting. And those present at that meeting were representatives of this commission, representatives of MHRC, Metro Legal, Metro Finance, and the Title VI complainants. At a subsequent meeting on June 13th, 2024, there was a second conciliation meeting that was attended by representatives only of this commission, MHRC, and the complainants. One of the, I would say, the most significant points of contention at both of those meetings was the funding of certain artists who were deemed to have been eligible, who met the grant eligibility criteria for funding, but were removed from consideration in this commission's vote, and that removal of those artists from your consideration was done so without clear deliberation among this commission, clear and, very importantly, clear communication to those artists that they had been removed from your consideration in the vote. This group of artists includes 26 muralists and 13 small and micro organizations that might have expected to be funded because they met the grant eligibility criteria, but ultimately were not funded. The proposed conciliated agreement proposes to pay these artists from the funds that were allocated by Director Crumbo, and this would result in disbursements totaling $564,828.48. There are 6 additional terms of the conciliation agreement, and I'm going to go through each of those now. One, that Metro Arts would provide an extension for the grant reporting and spending requirements for those Thrive artists who have received supplemental payments since March 22nd, and that those grant reporting requirements be extended to March 31st of 2025. Secondarily, that the muralists and the small and micro arts organizations who would receive funding under this agreement, that they would be granted an extension for both spending and grant reporting until June 30th of 2025. The second proposed term in the agreement doesn't really involve the Arts Commission, but just for clarity and for so everybody's on the same page, MHRC had requested that their staff be provided access, at least a read-only access, to the spreadsheet that has been maintained by Metro Legal regarding the disbursement of these supplemental payments. The third condition would be that Metro Legal, Metro Finance, MHRC, and Metro Arts agree to work together with each other, with Metro Council, with any necessary stakeholders that may be required to help find a legal path to preserve a program in the model of Thrive. In other words, a program that is substantially similar to Thrive that provides grants to individual artists. And I want to pause here to provide a little bit of additional context on this point. It has come to light over specifically over the past few months, given the additional scrutiny that Metro Arts grant funding has come under, that the Thrive program does not comport with the law, doesn't comport with Metro procurement rules, your own commission's bylaws, the Metro enabling ordinance for this commission, or state law. And every lawyer who's been involved in the conciliation process has come to this same conclusion. However, there is still a desire to support a Thrive-like program, but just in a different mechanism, a way that complies with the law. So what this agreement would do is that it would confirm all of the parties' commitment to a program that continues to fund individual artists, but would do so in such a way that would comport with the law and would meet the purposes of the Thrive program. The fourth condition also doesn't necessarily involve Metro Arts, but would require Metro Legal to create clear guidance for boards and commissions, specifically about the role that Metro Legal plays in board and commission operations, and that MHRC would be allowed the opportunity to review the draft of such guidance and provide feedback to Metro Legal when they issue this guidance. Fifth, Metro Arts would commit under this conciliated agreement to robust community engagement about any new grant policies and procedures, and to commit to consider that feedback. In a final written conciliated agreement that doesn't exist yet, this term would have to include a little bit more detail about the proposed methods of public engagement and perhaps a timeline or some benchmarks for how that engagement would unfold. And finally, the last substantive condition is that so long as the complainants, the individuals who filed the complaints, remain engaged in this effort toward conciliation, Metro Arts would agree to participate in a 1 hour-long continued conciliation meeting with 2 designated representatives of this complainant group, with the purpose of creating a greater shared understanding of past grant policies and procedures. Assuming this meeting takes place, the parties to this meeting can, of course, sort of meet in good faith and determine additional parameters that may be necessary just to ensure that this conversation is a productive conversation. So procedurally, at this point, MHRC, Metro Legal, and the complainants, as I understand it, have agreed to these terms in principle. We don't have a final agreement yet. You all haven't met to approve or disapprove of this. And so these proposed conciliation terms are now before you for your consideration. Some other sort of procedural matters related to this. So it's the intention of the parties, based on discussions to date, that if this commission approves the agreement today, we would reduce this to writing. It is our intention to do so by the end of this month, July 31st, with additional details and benchmarks as may be appropriate to sort of flesh out some of these terms, but that these are, in broad strokes, the terms of the agreement. A written conciliated agreement, of course, would include terms that the Arts Commission is not admitting any liability for discrimination or violation of Title VI, that the complainants would provide a full and final release of their claims against the Arts Commission in connection with their Title VI complaint, and that the complaint would be dismissed with prejudice. So if you approve the terms of as they've been outlined here and in the correspondence that I know has been provided to you in your packet, I would also ask that your vote authorize me to move forward in working with Dr. Coleman to finalize the written, more detailed agreement that would memorialize this agreement in principle.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to defer a little bit for a motion just so we can discuss it to Commissioner Jester or Commissioner Watts, because you two both worked with Ms. Tyler or Ms. Yarbrough on this. And so was there anything that either one of you wanted to say or mention or?
I don't have anything other than to note that what we're doing is something in principle, and in principle is still to be negotiated, if I hear you correctly. Because the devil is always in the detail. And those are the issues I think that we need to look at and understand as we move forward, and as we move forward, the public needs to understand. And it is going to be negotiated, and therein lies sometimes dilemmas for some people in the public view. But it does need to be transparent, and I mentioned that the other day, that a very transparent process of the kinds of things that are going and where we're going forward. But I do have a question, and that really is about the final agreement. Are we on some time parameters? Because I think at some point, the longer it takes, the more that Metro Arts may be looked at as dragging our feet. Let me just be honest on that today. And I'm prepared to do that. But I think that really is a question. That was just a discussion question to look at, because I think we have to understand that it is something we need to do quickly and we don't need to delay. We need to take a vote.
So my understanding is that if we vote we vote yes on this today, then Ms. Yarborough will get to work in drafting. Final.
That's the timeline I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Right. So, would you like me to respond, Chair Love, Commissioner Watts? So, as it stands right now, the other parties involved in this matter have agreed in principle to these terms. The expectation or the hope of the parties that have been involved in the conversation to date is that by July 31st, we would have assuming your vote in favor of the agreement today, that we would have a full written agreement. I will say, Dr. Coleman has been a very important partner in this process over the past couple of weeks as these conversations have really heated up. While it will be very much in the lawyer's hands to so-called paper this transaction, Dr. Coleman has throughout the past few weeks in these conversations is constantly thinking about the details of how this is going to play out. And she is very mindful of all of the specific pieces here and to sort of what's going to be sort of marshaled together and needed from the arts staff, from the Arts Commission to move forward with this agreement if you approve it today. So it won't just go into a black box with lawyers. I'll certainly be talking with those of you who have questions or have concerns about certain items, and we'll certainly be in constant communication with Dr. Coleman about sort of the specifics of these matters.
I would just like to add that I was particularly thankful to Dr. Coleman and those that showed up, especially for the second conciliation meeting, in the amount of good faith that was there. I think there was a little concern going into both the meetings, just how acrimonious it might be, and it just was. It's been for lack of a better term, a rather pleasant process, not as hard and difficult as I thought it might be. So just thank you, Dr. Coleman, for your leadership. Thank you for the good faith in the conciliation process. And with that, I'd like to make a motion that this commission accept these conciliation agreements in principle and continue moving forward with Tyler Yarborough and other stakeholders to reach final conciliation.
I'll second.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Dr. Coleman, did you want to say something?
No, the only thing is today we are July 18th, and I know the lawyers have been working, and July 31st, I just want to know there need to be some midpoints for review, and I don't know if it has to come back to the commission or you will give me the authority to approve, because we can't get it on July 31st and he say yes or no. So I'm just trying to say, what is a midpoint for review?
So, I mean, really, at any point that you desire, I will tell you nothing. While lawyers are working, I haven't seen anything yet because they're waiting to hear from you all about whether this is something that the Arts Commission wants to move forward with. And so, yes, I agree. I would like your vote to include the authority for Dr. Coleman and I to continue to work on this and to hammer out kind of the specifics and details. I think your motion included that, but I do want to be explicit about that there are some decisions that will have to be made in terms of benchmarks and specifics.
Yes, I think his motion included that. All right. We had a motion and a second. Any additional discussion before we vote? Vivian, can you roll call us?
Sure can.
Thanks.
Commissioner Dupree-Love,
Yes.
Commissioner Kurtz,
Yes.
Commissioner Lefkowitz,
Yes.
Commissioner Harden,
Yes.
Commissioner Jester,
Yes.
Commissioner McCoy,
Yes.
Commissioner Nichols Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Watts,
Yes.
Commissioner Brown,
Yes.
9.
All right, so we have 9 ayes. The motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. I really extend thanks to Commissioners Watts, Chair Love, Commissioner Jester, and Dr. Coleman for your help during this process. You all have been incredibly diligent, and I appreciate it. It's been a real privilege to work with you. I don't know if this will be my last time before you, but if it is, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so next on the agenda is our Metro Arts budget for fiscal year 25. Ms. Christina? Christiana, I'm sorry. I know your name and I'm looking at you and I still called you the wrong name. Please forgive me. You have the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chris Afote presented this year's FY25 budget. Any questions?
I would just like to say 2 things. This is basically our operating budget. It does not include the grants at all. And secondly, it does not include the 200 plus thousand that Commissioner Stiles, Councilwoman Stiles and other people were instrumental in getting for. So 2 critical points are not there, but this is the operating budget for the division at this moment.
Okay.
Oh, the second thing, in the Budget and Oversight Committee, and also just in my desire for us to make improvements, we will be presenting monthly financial statements to the commission. It was my understanding, and when I was trying to find a model, I didn't see any for the near term, and I have been told that there have not been any recently. And so that will be an important part and is also responsive to some of the observations from the internal audit. And we expect it to be rather straightforward, possibly 4 columns. Commissioner Lefkowitz has sent us some things she has from other nonprofit boards and commissions, and I've served on innumerable nonprofit boards and commissions and also state, regional, and local. And basically, it would be the budgeted amount. Then we would have the actual expenditures. Then we would have percent or variance or percent of spent either expense or income to date, so that we can just keep a monthly observation. And of course, Ms. Afote has some other things that she has been speaking about. I don't know if you want to talk.
I have nothing to say, actually. Just let the numbers speak for themselves, I guess.
Commissioner Watts, and then, okay, who's the next one? Go ahead.
Reinventing the wheel is wonderful, but my question is the one I think I keep asking, is whether or not something currently exists in the finance systems that will meet our needs, which means you're just pulling a report and giving it to us, which I think is the important piece, because it is an official document and it gives us up to date, rather than what I hear you doing is creating some things. But I think if there is a finance report that exists, that where we can get that information, it would be best to get it from the official report and walk us through and educate us on that, as opposed to creating a new one.
Can I respond? I think that we may have identified one of those, Commissioner Watt.
There should be one. I'm just gonna say
yeah, and I actually sent something to Chris yesterday, and we're gonna look at that. So you're absolutely right. I think there is something that exists that provides that monthly view, which would be super helpful, and would mean that you won't have to reinvent.
And we're looking at an official document. That's the piece. So that we know what's in the reports that are coming out. So
and Chris can.
Yes, I can provide all of that. Sure.
Commissioner Jester.
I know we talked about this just a little bit in budget and oversight, but if you could talk a little bit more about the $352,600 in management consulting services and whether there's anything that's specifically that's for, or just an amount of money that could be allocated elsewhere if we don't need to utilize $350,000 of management consulting?
Yeah, great question. So that is basically what's been allotted to our department for those services. At this very moment, we don't have a need for hiring consultants to use those funds at the moment. As far as implementing and doing a journal entry, so to speak, the only thing we can't do for use those funds for is for salaries of employees. So I will be connecting with OMB, Office of Management Budget, to see what options are available for us to maybe do a journal entry to utilize those funds for something else, because we are trying to minimize expenses this year and continue with being more, I guess, effective with funds that we have, very limited on top of that. So. Yeah. Including temporary services as well, so.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Sure.
I just wanted to say that I believe last year there was like $900,000 plus for consulting services. And at this moment, we don't even have not allocated that how we would use the 352. That's why the meeting tomorrow with OMB and an explanation of something that they call true up will help us knowing how much flexibility there is or is not in terms of any changes or redeployment of figures that are already here. So we're exploring that and we'll be able to report back.
All right, any other questions?
Just, is there a preferred format? And I know in budget and oversight, we're going to be talking about that for presenting.
If it's as clear as this is the clearest financial report I've seen since January, so thank you.
Yeah, I think, let us see
what we found,
what you found, and then let's look at it compared to this, because I think we have two pieces, and then look to see if we need anything else. I think that would be the best way to go at this point. We go from nothing to about 100%, probably in those two documents. So.
All right, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
So next we have the Public Art Committee. Jessica, come before us. Make sure the green light is on and you have the floor.
Is it on? Thanks, Chuck. Hi, everyone. It's good to see you. Welcome, Commissioner Brown. Thanks for joining the commission. I just came from the Strobel House ribbon cutting. We're very excited that that project is moving along, that we have Omari Booker. That's not one of the updates on your screen, but just wanted to mention that. It was a really lovely event. All we have tonight for you are not action items, or this afternoon, it's just updates for some community engagement opportunities where we would actually love you and all the public watching to join us. So tonight we have expanded our lending library collection with 53 new works that are going to 5 new branches. So right now we have lending library at Madison and Southeast. It's expanding to Donaldson, Old Hickory, East Green Hills, and Hermitage with 53 new works. Before we distribute those works, we like to have a celebration of all the works together and an opportunity to engage the artists with the public for community engagement. That's tonight. The exhibition is hung in the mezzanine gallery at the main branch of Nashville Public Library. Just want to say the exhibition looks beautiful. Our whole team has worked really hard on this, and we'll have a reception from 5:30 to 8, and the exhibition is on view until August the 16th. We'd love for you to join us. We will have comments around 6 with our ED, Dr. Coleman, and with the ED of the library, so we'd love to see you there. Another event we have coming up is a celebration and community engagement event for Alicia Israel Morozic's mural at Cassie Gardner Senior Park, July 27th from 4:30 to 7:30. It's going to be a family-friendly event. We're going to have pizza, an ice cream truck, music, free art supplies. We'd love for you to share this event, and we will be sharing ways that you can distribute this on your socials or via email if you want to invite family members, friends, community members to this great event. In August, we have a celebration for the Nolensville Road Bus Shelter Project. That will be August 17th from 10 to 1 at Plaza Mariachi. We're going to have a nacho bar. We're going to have art supplies. Another family-friendly event to engage the public with art, with artists, and with Metro Arts. So that is all from me. Thank you.
All right, do you have a question? Yeah.
What time is the August 17th event?
It's 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Yeah, it's okay.
I just want to say that, I think you all have been knocking it out of the park, Public Arts.
Yeah.
And several of us came to the Donaldson.
Yeah, Donaldson Library dedication.
Yeah, that was a wonderful event, and it was so great to see the art there that day. And so I just want to say, well done. And
Thank
it's, all this is really beautiful.
Well, and it's so nice to see you all at these events because you guys go from approval through updates to dedications. And as you know, and many of you know who've served on the commission for a while, it can take years to realize these projects. So it's nice when we get to a moment of dedicating and celebrating their completion. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right, next we have Budget and Oversight Committee. Commissioner Watts, you have the floor.
Thank you. We met on Tuesday for the full 2 hours, looking at some real dates, and one of those is the 10/1/2024 date for the Tennessee Arts Commission. So we're looking at probably a more aggressive kind of a move than most people think we should, and we apologize to staff, but we think there are some things in place, and we're going to start at the easy places. Speaking of public arts, what I've noticed is that public arts is pretty defined and definitive in what they do, how they do it, and everything else. So we need to highlight and understand that, since they can come pretty quickly, sorry, Jessica, on August the 2nd, to sort of give us a real understanding of how you do things, even though it takes time and those kind of things. And I'm on Public Arts Committee, so I'd learned some of that, so.
It's the 2nd of the 6th.
It's the 2nd, isn't it? Tell us, Vivian. Or is it the 6th? It's the 6th? The 6th, okay. I'm sorry. Dates keep flying around in my head on other stuff. Okay, the 6th. So August the 6th. And we will put them on first, allocate time. We want to look at, I think, what you provided some of us for onboarding materials, those kind of things, so that we get an understanding of budget and oversight, and then we'll come back to this body. And we'll move through a process where we'll be looking at additional things. We think we're going to look at HR. What are we currently doing, and where are we with respect to maybe some gaps, and what do we need to do those? All of these fold back to the audit, and we're going to back and forth, what is it, A through M? Or what? We're looking at those as it relates to the audit. A, if something is in place, we're going to note that. If things need to be put in place, we'll note that, which means we're pretty much trying to build the answers of what we agree fully. I assume we can agree in part, since I've done enough audits and respond, agree in part and talk about what we are doing, what we have done, and what we will do. And that's really where we are simply. But we know that we're going to try to do HR and public arts at the next, and then look at the budgets. But 24 closeout and the FY25 documents that Dr. Coleman mentioned, so we can sort of look to see if that meets our needs, and then come back to this body to see if it'll meet your needs as well. I think that's it for me, unless there's any questions.
All right, do we have any questions? Won't you look at that? All right, thank you, Commissioner Watts. All right, next we have Commissioner Jester with Grants and Funding. You have the floor.
Thank you. Grants and funding has been in a bit of a holding pattern as we work on paying out fiscal year 24, work through the conciliation process, and then as we, as much as possible in public meeting, discern how to move forward best in a new grant cycle without ending up in a similar situation that we found ourselves in over the last year or so. To that end, our next scheduled grants and funding meeting will be hopefully on August 12th. We're not going to have one for July, but we are in the early stages of putting together a public meeting that should happen before the August 12th grants and funding committee meeting, so we can start getting community feedback on ways to move forward in the new grant process. So our next meeting will be, like I said, August 12th. Pay attention for updates about an upcoming public meeting where you can come and voice your thoughts around the next grant funding cycle, and we'll keep moving forward one step at a time.
All right, do we have any questions or comments for Commissioner Jester? All right, thank you so much. We'll move on to our Care Committee. Commissioner Harden?
Thank you, Chair Love. We met with the Care Committee last Friday at Metro Southeast from 5 o'clock p.m. to 7 p.m. It was a very successful meeting from my standpoint. We are kind of finding ourselves in the space of realignment with care. One of the key aspects of care is really the community involvement and really community, the ideas for the community to steer the work that's being done in care. So it created a unique model for makeup, and we're trying to kind of go back through our guidelines, defining what equity means from in terms of Metro Arts and the Care Committee, to kind of back us up a little bit and hope that we can make it more effective. I think we have a number of open spots on that committee, but before we do recruit and bring more community members in, we want to kind of find our basis again. So thank you specifically to Lydia and Claudia, Chuck, and Josiah, and Heather. You all have been very helpful, and I think our meetings have been really live workshopping, in real time, which I think is a bit unique for some of these committees, but we're starting to trust each other, I think, a little bit more. So I hope that can help. We are also going to be meeting more regularly. So up until this point, I think we had aligned to meet specifically right before commission meetings, but we're going to meet monthly, I think, because there's so much that we want to get through and so much discussion that those 2 hours go by pretty quickly. Another thing I will note is we do want community involvement, so we're trying to schedule these meetings at times and places where they're accessible. So that explains us meeting on a Friday at 5 p.m. So just with that in mind, it's an effort. We didn't have a great turnout from community members not on the committee, but that is our goal, I think, in the long run, is to make it more accessible, because we really do want to hear from the community in this specific committee. So that's a brief update. We're going to continue to kind of workshop and find alignment, and then we'll meet again in August. So we'll have hopefully a couple more updates in October. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Harden. And I just want to, I don't think I've publicly said this. Thank you for coming in. I think after your first meeting, you were chair of CARE. And so I appreciate you coming in and stepping in, and maybe the kudos goes to the administration and the council for bringing you to us and, giving us people who are ready to get to work day one. So thank you so much for coming in and getting to work. So Commissioner Brown, you get ready. But again, thank you so much, Commissioner Harden, for that. So we appreciate that. The next thing is me. Yeah, so me. So we had an executive committee meeting on Monday, and this was actually my first executive committee meeting as acting chair. I know I always say that, but as acting chair, Love. And one thing that we discussed is wanting to have standing meetings, because this was really my second executive committee meeting since I've been on the commission, and so I'm not sure what happened prior to that, but we do want to make sure that we are having consistent meetings as an executive committee. Reading through the audit, most of the things that we discussed were things, again, that we already knew, and we were trying to work towards that. And so the things that we discussed at the Monday's meeting was, one, our timeline. We have an interim director, and so we appointed Dr. Coleman on May the 16th. So I think she's officially been here for 2 weeks and 2 months. Yes, 2 months. I don't know what's wrong with me today. I can't read or see her, but she's been with us for 2 months, and she has been very instrumental in guiding us through this transition period and just providing some stability. One of the things that has been difficult for us was we were, acting as managers, HR, all of these things. And so it made interactions and communications just a little bit more difficult, and just things that were out of our wheelhouse. And we did understand that. And so we are so happy that we do have someone in place. And so we have reached out to HR to see what that process looks like to start a search. And so one of the things that I said in the executive committee is that I will appoint a search committee from us to work with HR so that we are working together. And so we know what's going on and know the timeline. And so just be looking out more of what that will look like. The next thing is just bylaws. One of the things that did come out of the audit as well, and one thing that we were looking at is, reviewing our bylaws. Do they need to be tweaked? Do they need to be changed? Or, what does that look like? And so something that came out of that was that we did have a vote as a commission in November, I believe. And so we need to make sure that those things were incorporated into the bylaws that we're looking at now before we go and do another review of our bylaws. And so instead of appointing another committee, because we are pretty lean, we have other lives, and so being on all these committees can be a little bit stressful. And so instead of appointing another committee, the executive committee is kind of going to be the wheelhouse of where we look at the bylaws first and, send any suggestions to legal so legal can compile those things, send it back to us. And what I would love between now and, the next couple of weeks or so is that any commissioner, if you see something, read through the bylaws, send suggestions to legal, ask the question, does this make sense? Can we do this? Make sure it fits. Send all of those suggestions to Tessa, and then she will provide that back to us so we can see what that looks like and see if that's something that we want to do as a body. And so I want to make sure that as an entire commission, we all are kind of taking ownership of what is going to be essentially our governing document of how we operate. And so I would just love if we can take a look at that. But while you're doing that, we will look at, our previous documents and previous minutes and make sure that all those changes that were voted on in November are incorporated because they may be duplicative work at that point. And then one of the other things is nominating committee. I have appointed a nominating committee, and those members are Commissioner Wade, Commissioner Harden, and Commissioner Jester. And they will be working on our elections, or just essentially giving us names of people who can serve as chair, vice chair, and secretary. And I would like Commissioner Wade to kind of take the lead on that because Commissioner Harden and Commissioner Jester are chairing other committees, and I want to share the love. And so if the three of you all get together and meet and figure out who is eligible to be chair, someone who has been on at least a year according to our bylaws now. And then for a vice and secretary, there are no specifications around how long they've been on the commission. And so it's my understanding is you all should meet and present those back to us before our next meeting because we have to vote before September according to our bylaws, and we do not meet in September. We meet in August, and then we meet in October. Tessa, is this correct? Okay. Okay, because I will speak out of turn, and I always have to look at you. Okay, so yes, if we can meet before that to just give us some names of some people so that at our August meeting we can have an election on who's going to serve in these positions. Any questions?
Does Commissioner Wade, I'm assuming she does, but does she know she's right?
Yeah, she knows. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then the last thing is that we discussed was just board interactions. And so, again, this was kind of discussed a little bit when we didn't have an interim director, just not knowing who to talk to, how to talk to. And what I want to make sure that we do is just understand our responsibility. We are a policy board. We're here. We do not handle operational things. And so I know that got kind of blurry when we didn't have a director, and this is for staff, this is for commissioners. If there's an issue with a staff person, first you go to your manager, then you go to your director, then you go to, Dr. Coleman. Unless there's like fraud or something illegal, there's really not a situation where someone is coming directly to a commissioner to solve a problem that's operational or HR issues. And I know that's difficult because we were kind of stepping in, and I just want to make sure that we are truly understanding what our role is, because we do not work for Metro. And I know that's difficult sometimes because those lines have been blurred a little bit. And I want to say that again, we do not work for Metro, and staff doesn't necessarily report to us. We have one employee right now, and that's Dr. Coleman. And so I just want to make sure that we understand how those relationships work. And to that as well, we took a vote as an executive committee on Monday. And this was addressed a little bit during public comment when Commissioner Stiles spoke about the bill that impacted our commission. Because that vote was going to be taken before we had a commission meeting, that triggered the executive committee to be able to make a statement essentially on behalf of the commission. And so the executive committee voted unanimously to defer to the will of the council. And so I just want to make sure that I want all of us to have your own opinions, and you should have your own opinion. You can speak to whoever you want to as an individual commissioner, but just making sure that nothing that we do gives the appearance that you're speaking on behalf of the commission, especially when there was already a vote taken as what that voice was going to be. And I do know that, and I don't think that it was done intentionally, but just making sure that we remember that, because things appear what they may not be. And I do want to give a moment here for Commissioner Lepowitz just to explain or just give a statement on what happened, because I don't think that it was done the way that it was received. Yes.
Well, sure. I mean, I think, as Chair Love said, what happened in the executive committee meeting, and as I understood it, was we were asked if we wanted to take a position on this bill, and specifically the piece, right, about having a council person appointed. And we unanimously agreed that it would be best for us to stay neutral on that. I will say that I've been following this bill for a long time. I've had some really good discussions with Councilperson Stiles about it. I've come to her committee. I go to a lot of council meetings. I go to a lot of committee meetings because I'm able to. I have flexibility, especially in the summer. And truly, I will say, as a new commissioner, that's been one of the joys of it, because I never really knew up close, right, how these things operated. So I've very much enjoyed that. I've sent a lot of emails before to committees and to council, but I did send an email that night stating my own personal opposition to the bill. I will say that in my reasoning, I gave 3 kind of reasons. I also acknowledged the intent of the bill, and which I think is incredible. And I am so appreciative of Chair Stiles and her committee for the way they want to support us. I was opposed to it on other grounds. I did say, though, in my email that I didn't have an opinion on the piece in which we voted. So I kept myself, in my email, I felt like neutral. So I agree with you, Chair Love. I think it is important that we not try and represent our own, kind of say that our opinions are reflective of the committee as a whole, and that was not my intent. I try to write my words very carefully, and I read everything I write several times, and that truly never occurred to me. I also, though, do want to encourage commissioners, if you have time and to go and learn and go to these committees. I've been welcomed at all of these committees. I've spoken on things, and I didn't felt insecure about that. And I never feel like I have enough information. But again, as a citizen, I think it is important. We are commissioners, but we are also citizens, and we can be involved in this way. And I have no doubt that we'll all we all want the same things for arts, and we're going to find our way through it. So thank you for letting me clarify that, and I'll continue to show up. So.
Yes, and I appreciate you being able to go there because it is important. If you've never done this before or done this type of work, you just don't know. And there's a lot of information out there. And so I encourage people to reach out to the council, reach out, let them know some of the issues that you're having as a commissioner or just different things that you see. But sometimes it's not received the way that we deliver it. And so I never want there to be any confusion or when we can just clear that up, in an open setting. So those were all the things that was discussed in the executive committee. I don't think I left out anything. Are there any questions? Oh, yes. Okay. So, and then I'll go to Dr. Coleman.
What deadline would you say for, just so I can put it in the notes, for commissioners to send Tessa the comments on because if our meeting's in a couple of weeks, what would be a good date for them to do that by?
Oh, goodness. Oh, no. Legal, what do you think?
An adequate red line draft that's clear for the commission to make decisions on.
So would July 31st or August 1 be too late? That will give us essentially almost 2 weeks and then 2 more weeks. Okay. So let's just say by August 1, we will have, if you have any suggestions, and our bylaws are not that in-depth that it needs just this complete overhaul. It could be just some commas or just one word or two. So if you have no suggestions, that's fine too. But yes, if you see something, say something, and she'll get it back to us. Commissioner Watts. Oh, I'm so sorry.
On bylaws, we mentioned them back in April, and Commissioner Nephlin was actually looking at them for oversight and budget. One of the things I will say is that we're probably going to have a whole lot of overlap and concern, and oversight and budget is going to be asking a whole lot of questions about a whole lot of processes, including those for us as commissioners around issues and policies and those kind of things, whether it's public comment, how we should do it, what we should do not to. And that's just one of those things that I've done most of my career. Some people don't like to talk. Some people don't like to attend meetings. So that's not mandatory, but just what kind of guidance can be given for those kinds of things. So we're looking at a lot of things for staff, commissioners, and for the overall operations of Metro Arts. So
I just wanted to say one thing about the executive director search. Staff feels very strongly that they had not been involved in the process previously, and I would like very much to ensure that at least one staff member will be on the committee. We did send an email to the director of HR, Shannon Hall, about the process and what needs to be entailed. And the staff has worked on a position description based on 2 previous ones. And I think we need to make sure that we not ignore those people who are going to be most impacted by who. And they have, even though a lot of them are new, less than a year, there are some who are well tenured and do have perspective. So I just want to make sure we incorporate those 2 things in. And I think I passed it on to you. If I didn't, I will. The position description for the executive director, and then make sure that when we hear from Director Hall, that she gets that same information.
Yes, Commissioner McCoy.
On new business?
No, we're not on new business yet. Dr. Coleman still has to do her report. Are there any other questions for my report? If not, we'll go to Dr. Coleman.
I sent all of you an update, and I don't really have much more to add than that. One of the things is I don't know what format you would like. I did hear from Commissioner Jester and Commissioner McCoy that they appreciated the information, and also that Commissioner McCoy would like higher level. The things we are currently working on are to ensure that our points of view are incorporated into the July 31st outcomes from the lawyers. They have been working on that themselves at this point and have not presented anything, so we will follow up with them. Secondly, we are working with the response to the audit, and also being very mindful of the October 1st deadline for Tennessee Arts Commission. I will be meeting with them because they have a perspective on what should have been there and was not there. And I have some, but Amanda Deaton-Moyer from Finance was very intimately involved. Sydney Davis from our office, Tessa Ortiz-Marsh was very intimately involved. And I mean, there were just some things that, for example, in some instances, there were no formal contracts that adhered. There was maybe an email or something. So we really want to make sure that, given the internal audit and the recent experiences, I think it's really nothing short of miraculous at how hard people worked that we're able to close this out in less than 2 months. And it was a lot of reconstituting and redeveloping materials and information. Beyond that, you had asked early on when we were talking that I develop a state of Metro Arts, just where we are and what's going on. And I had hoped to have had it finished, but it's not finished. And so probably the end of the month or early August, it will be finished. It's just to kind of my perspective, having been there 2 months, some of the challenges we have encountered. One serious issue is the absence of documents within, I'm going to call them policies and procedures, manuals, or desk references that aren't present in the department. And that's a very, very high priority because some of the things we are encountering, well, I'll just give you an example. This morning, we have an event tonight, and apparently we had not gotten 3 quotes. Apparently there was misunderstanding whether it was 2,500 or 25,000. And so those kinds of things we don't need to keep having happen. And I think if we can work closely with people who are doing it right and develop these materials. And a lot of it is around finance and operations. There's so many things that crop up daily. You just can't imagine. And we have one full-time person and one part-time person. So that's another thing that all of them are interrelated. And so hopefully, by first 100 days, we'll have some handle on all of this and can move forward. And I'm so grateful for the work of the Budget and Oversight Committee and everybody, because it's a joint effort, and we really have to change the narrative about Metro Arts. We do outstanding work. The public art is, I would put it up with any public art program in the country. But we also have to expand. We do more than grant making. We do more than public art, and we haven't had much opportunity to do that. We are doing amazing engagement with artists, lots of projects around those things. And I think we're on the right trajectory, but it's going to take a laser-like focus to make it happen. That's all I have to say. And if there's a format or if there's something, I like the updates because they can be informal and they can come anytime. But if there's a formal task that procedure or process that you would like for the executive director's report, I am certainly open and amenable.
All right. Thank you so much. Did you have something, or you were just looking at me?
I just thank you for your leadership. There was, in the period between January and when you started, it was pretty easy to step into more of a leadership management role that should not have happened. And we tried to keep those very different, but it was hard. And so thank you for stepping in the leadership that you brought. I know the transition's not always easy, but you're doing a good job. Thank you.
Let me just say that our role in budget and oversight is not to create more work for Dr. Coleman, but to help her with her work. And what we said was, how can we help you get to where you need to get to? And I think that is really something we need to think about as commissioners, rather than trying to help do the work. What do you need from us? And that's a question I put on this meeting today, because I think it's important that we meet the needs as you have defined them based on the information you have. And I said, I think you should need to know more than us and sort of guide us through some of this process. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to take on this position, because now that you've gotten here, we know what you're doing a lot. Thank you.
I must say, one of the things that has been very interesting is that the staff is very, very, I mean, it's as close as I've seen to a paperless office. And I really have to kind of step up, and I need coaching and everything else, but they are really amazing. And as I said, it's the closest I've seen to a paperless office. They're laughing.
Are there any, right? So the future is now. So are there any other questions or updates before we get to new and old business?
Chair Love, I had one.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure everyone knows the month of August. I actually got my calendar pulled up. So the first meeting is going to be Budget and Oversight on the 6th at 12 o'clock. The Public Art Committee is on August 8th at 11 a.m. We have grants and funding scheduled as of right now for the 12th of August at 12:30. And then we have commission scheduled for the 15th of August at 12. The 3 meetings that need to be scheduled will be CARE, nominating, and executive. Positive CARE's doodle already went out to those committee members, and then I will be sending a doodle out to the nominating committee and the executive committee to schedule those dates soon. And all of that will be posted on the Nashville.gov website for dates and times.
Can I just follow? Did you say there's a commission meeting the 15th?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner McCoy, and then I'll go to you. Okay.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the internal audit report. And what I heard is that there needs to be guidance for the commissioners. And I know that there's been a discussion about having a retreat. There are only 3 commissioners that I see who have been on here a year, were low in rank. And I wish that I had as much information through the majority of my service as I've gotten today. That budget report is greatly appreciated, but I never saw anything budget-wise until November, having been on this commission from March of last year. And I think that what Commissioner Love said about parameters and what we as commissioners should be doing and what has been done during this last year really walked all over what I consider the roles and responsibilities of a commissioner versus the staff and the involvement. It was probably of necessity, but my understanding of the roles is really policy, as you said. And I think having a retreat in which we can hear what other people's experiences have been and our understanding of how the commission should operate would be beneficial for not only me, but anybody that's new or quasi-new, because we have been operating kind of like play it as it goes, and that's not really the way to run. I have a great deal of confidence in our interim director. I am tremendously impressed with how much she has been able to accomplish in such a short period of time. And I don't know if she can put it on her plate to have a retreat for us.
We have to.
Thank you. That's the end of my comment.
All right. Who was next? I forget. Okay. Commissioner Lefowitz and then Commissioner Jester.
Just two quick things. Kind of related to what you said, Vivian, about the meetings. I was thinking that, and I talked to Tessa about this, and I can't remember if I mentioned it to you. I hope so. But anyway, I'm going to just like each week I make a list of things that are Metro Arts. I mean, just like a simple list, right, with a link. So this could be events. It could be our commission meetings. I also keep a list of council, like to our point about being like relevant council meetings and the committee meetings. I'm just going to have that list. I'm going to send it to Vivian and ask if she could forward it to you every Friday. That way you'll just have a list of those things. It also has links to the live meetings as well, so you can watch those, just in an effort to keep, so you know, kind of, might make it easier to know what's going on. And then the second thing is Vivian and I are working on a new plan for minutes that are more action-oriented. And so we hope to have things out like a draft within a few days. And so we're almost done, for example, with budget and oversight, and we have action steps at the top. So trying to prioritize that so everybody knows like kind of our dates and what to do. And then we can make edits. They're clearly drafts and approve. So those are just two kind of like procedural things, secretarial things maybe, but that I hope will keep us, I hope will be beneficial. And if they're not, just tell me and I'll stop doing them.
Okay. Thank you for that, because one thing that we, when we got here, secretary type work was done by staff. And according to our bylaws, that's for our secretary, not that they can't work in concert together. And so how can we help? We're pulling some things off of staff so they can do the things that they were hired to do. And so we do have a secretary on our commission. And so she will be helping out doing a lot of that work in concert with Vivian. So thank you for reminding us to look at our documents to see who's supposed to do what and when and how. And so thank you so much. Commissioner Jester.
Yes, I have two things. One, thanks to this nicely curated budget, we can see that the printing budget for the year is only $2,000. So that's probably why we're paperless. And I just wanted to give a quick grants and funding update that I did not give during my my portion here. So 76 of 76 operating grants for FY24 have been paid out in a total of $1,751,210, and 95 of 96 Thrive grants for fiscal year 24 have been paid out, totaling $2,347,924.31, with one grantee payment pending, totaling $6,500.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Commissioner Watts.
Can we get a copy of that? Because I kept looking to see if I had it. I thought I had that. I did not. Can we just get a copy of that?
Sure. I think it is in your packet because I didn't bring it special.
Which one? It should be, yes.
Yeah, I'm still looking for it. I can't find it, so.
It's near the back of the packet.
Okay. All right. Do we have any other old or new business before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Now I'm so proud of us. We had a lot to do today, too. All good?
We'll figure it out.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
All right. All those in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned at 2:03. Thank you. Look at us. We are so cool. Welcome, Commissioner Brown again. Thank you.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.